Thank you all for joining today. It's up to you if you'd like to turn on your camera. So if you've never used Zoom before, all of your controls are down at the bottom of the browser window. So if you accidentally become unmuted, just please be sure to mute yourself again. You can start and stop your video at that other icon down there. And then if you have a question, you can simply type it into the chat box. I will be sure to keep track of all of the chat boxes as I go. And it actually is quite helpful if you feel comfortable to turn on your camera. It's great to have that interaction between all of us. So this will be recorded so that if you miss something today and you decide that you want to come back and watch it again tomorrow or anytime, if you have an annual subscription, it will be here for you for a year. And then if you have a monthly subscription, it will be here for you for a month. So today we're going to be talking about optimum thyroid balance. And so we're going to start out by going through what is thyroid hormone, how do we make it, what are our key building blocks of thyroid hormone, and then we are going to be sure that we go over foods, essential oils, and herbs and supplements. So if you don't watch it today, you can go over to my website and it will be uploaded there. I encourage each of you, if you're having any trouble with my website, the easiest way to ensure that you can download everything and get access to everything is by creating an account. So if you have an account, all of your downloads will be there in the My Downloads section, and that will be the easiest way to get access to all of this. So I would love to know, just like, is it Bree or Bray? I'm not sure how to say it. Which one? I can see you.
Oh, it's Bray.
Bray. So just like she just did, if you could please post what your top questions for today are, and I will be as cognizant as I can to be sure to get those out to everyone. If I ever say anything that's unclear, please just let me know and I will backtrack and try to say it in a different way that's a bit more clear. So let's go ahead and get started. I think that the curriculum today will take at least an hour for me to get through it, if not an hour, 15, hour and a half, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. And as I've said, just put any questions that you have over in the chat box and I'll acknowledge them as we go through. So let's start out and talk about the basics of hormones. So if you watched the webinar last month on reproductive hormones, this is going to be a bit of a review. So what is a hormone? A hormone is a regulatory substance that's produced in an organism, and it's usually transported in tissue fluids such as the blood, and this helps to stimulate specific cells or tissues. So both plants and animals have hormones, and these govern things like growth, development, sexual reproduction, metabolism, and so much more. In humans, we have also our water homeostasis, as well as our stress response is all governed by our hormone balance. Hormones act in ways that are distinctly different from nerves. So nerves tend to send an electrical signal basically in a straight line. And then when these electrical signals reach their target tissue, it can cause a muscle to contract or cause maybe a sense to be turned on. So like the sense of smell or the sense of sight, so that you could process what you're seeing or smelling. This acts in a way, like I said, that's completely different from hormones. The way that hormones work is they're secreted by one cell, and then they usually move through the blood to some type of target tissue. However, when they reach that tissue, they have to have a receptor in order to have an action. So if you think about like an old school radio, you can send out a radio signal all day long, but until you have a receiver to get that signal, it's not going to do anything. So hormones work like that. They have to hit a receiver. So the study of hormones, hormone receptors, as well as their signaling pathways are all called endocrinology. And so all of our hormone functions are housed in a system called the endocrine system. Hormones are secreted by structures in the brain, such as the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and then all throughout the body in places like our thyroid, pancreas, adrenal glands, ovaries, and testes. So those all combined are known as your classic endocrine organs. However, there are special cells on the atria of the heart, as well as scattered cells throughout the small intestines that also produce hormones, and these are called the diffuse endocrine system. So why do we care? Why are so many people talking about optimum hormone balance? Well, every cell, every organ, and every body process is influenced by hormones. And the influence can be quite substantial. So you can have entire body systems that are almost completely reliant on hormone action. Also, hormones are critical for our ability to grow and develop our mental status. And so you have a lot of different things that hormones do that's really important. It also governs our glucose homeostasis. So being sure that we've got enough sugar in our bodies so that we can run our body processes, and not too much to where we have hyperglycemia and have symptoms of that. So hormones govern everything: growth, reproduction, energy, and glucose homeostasis. The other cool thing about hormones is that they all work in concert with one another. So you rarely find one hormone that acts in isolation. In general, it's all about the hormones functioning together as a set. When hormones are received by their receptor, this is when they turn on a cell. This is important because they may pass by hundreds, thousands, millions of cells before they get to that receptor. And they only exert actions on those cells that have a receptor. So hormones work in a couple of different ways. So there are basically three different types of action that hormones can have. One is called an endocrine action, and that's the way most of our thyroid hormones work, because they're originally secreted. So it starts at the hypothalamus, up and deep inside the brain, goes to the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary talks to your thyroid, and the thyroid starts to secrete thyroid hormone. It may travel to your heart, it may travel to your gut, it may travel to your muscles, to your pancreas, but it travels somewhere distant from where it started. And this is called endocrine action. Then you have paracrine action, where a hormone is secreted and it targets a cell right next to it. So there's a receptor for that hormone right on a cell that's really close to it. Lastly, there's autocrine action, and that's when a hormone is secreted by a cell and then it turns and hits itself. So the important thing is it's not just secreting the hormone. In order to have autocrine action and to turn itself on, it has to still hit that receptor. Hormones can either turn on or off a biological response. So when a hormone binds a receptor and activates it, this is called agonism. And when it binds one and turns it off, this is called antagonism. So how are hormones governed? In general, hormones are governed by a really nice system known as a feedback loop. So we have multiple hormones that all interact with each other. In regards to thyroid balance, at the very basic level, we have the hypothalamus in our brain that secretes thyroid hormone releasing hormone. That then talks to your anterior pituitary, and that anterior pituitary produces thyroid stimulating hormone that then comes down to your thyroid and says, make thyroid hormone. Well, as levels get too high in your body, so when you have enough thyroid hormone, it feeds back to either the hypothalamus or the pituitary and says, hey, you've got enough, don't make any more. If you don't have enough, then your body sends a signal that says, hey, I don't have enough, help me out. And it triggers you to make more. And this is a feedback loop that governs not only thyroid hormone balance, but also testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, a lot of other hormone balance is governed by this system where we tell our body, hey, I've got enough or I don't have enough. So, okay, I see some questions coming through about essential oils, etc. If you don't mind, if you send them out to everyone instead of directly to me, that's going to help us make sure that I get all those questions answered, and that way we make sure that everybody can see them so that we stay on pace. And I'm not the only expert in the room. There are plenty of people here that know a lot about essential oils. So if you see a question that you know the answer to, feel free just to go ahead and give it an answer. As a reminder, I can't answer disease treatment questions, and so let's stay as compliant as we can. And if you struggle to ask your question compliantly, don't worry. I'll figure out a way to phrase it for you. So what does thyroid hormone do for us? Well, let me take a step back. That was the end of our first big introductory section. So any questions about how hormones work or anything, feel free to go ahead and post them. Otherwise, I will go ahead and move on. So what are the actions of thyroid hormone? Basically, there are three primary functions of thyroid hormone. You have your metabolic function, your cardiovascular function, and developmental functions. So the thyroid is primarily responsible for governing the basal metabolic rate. And this basal metabolic rate has effects on almost all body tissues. This is what we sort of as a colloquialism call he or she has a fast metabolism, or, oh, I have a slow metabolism. That is evidence of your basal metabolic rate. So this basal metabolic rate impacts almost every body system by governing our appetite, absorption of substances out of our foods. It also ensures the generation, uptake, and breakdown of glucose. So if you've got a really fast metabolic rate, you're going to be really eating through a lot of that glucose. Whereas if you have a slower metabolic rate, you may struggle to get the glucose going. So here's the other thing. Thyroid hormones also break down fats, and they increase the amount of free fatty acids in the body. So that is cool because free fatty acids are a way that we can utilize and create energy for our body. The other cool thing is that despite increasing free fatty acids in the blood, We also can be shown to decrease cholesterol levels naturally with naturally occurring thyroid hormone. This may be because we increase the rate of secretion of cholesterol into our bile. And when we do that, we increase the amount that we poop out, basically. So you can get rid of cholesterol, including the bad cholesterol, while still generating free fatty acids that your body can use as energy. So that is number one. So metabolically, so the thyroid is so important for our metabolic function, for speeding up the heart, speeding up the gut, being sure that we're absorbing our food, and then breaking down complicated food parts into items that we can use for energy. Cardiovascular. So thyroid hormones naturally increase the strength. So that's how hard your heart beats, as well as the rate, and that's how fast it beats. So cardiovascularly, it also increases the rate of breathing, as well as the intake and consumption of oxygen. It also increases the activity of our mitochondria. So mitochondria are basically little energy factories inside your cells. So the faster that your mitochondria are running, the more energy you're generating in ATP, as well as this really cool little staircase of electrons falling down the staircase. And as those electrons fall down the staircase, they generate energy at each step along the way. So combined from the heart rate, increasing the rate and strength of the contractions of the heart, as well as increasing the breathing and intake and consumption of oxygen, both of these combined impact our blood flow and our body temperature. So if your heart is beating fast and strong, you're going to have more blood flow out to those extremities. And if you're breathing faster, consuming more oxygen, as well as your heart beating faster, you're going to get hotter and increase that basal metabolic rate as you go. Thirdly, you have your developmental functions. And these I've spent a lot of time studying because number one, I think they're fascinating. And number two, I don't think we give enough credence to the critical role of thyroid hormone during pregnancy and lactation. So thyroid hormones are critical for normal body development. They increase the rate of growth in young people, and cells in the developing brain, both in utero as well as throughout childhood, are a major target for both T3 and T4. So we'll get into the difference between T3 and T4 in just a moment, but just know that T3 is your more potent form of thyroid hormone, and then T4 is a less potent sort of carrier version of thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone plays a particularly critical role in brain maturation, as well as maturation during fetal development. So those are all very, very important. Thyroid hormones, other roles that they serve, they also play a role in maintaining normal sexual function, sleep, and normal thought patterns. So for people who have erratic behaviors, or it can be everywhere, an erratic behavior all the way down to a crippling depression. It may just be as simple as balancing out the thyroid hormone to get those thoughts back in order and back in line. We also know that I thought this was fun. So thyroid hormone can increase the rate of idea generation. So you start thinking and you're like, oh yeah, I got all these awesome ideas, but it actually decreases your focus. So even though you're able to create a lot of great ideas, you may not be able to focus until your thyroid hormone kind of comes back down and balances out. Sexual function, including libido, as well as maintenance of a normal menstrual cycle, are all governed by thyroid hormone. So, any questions before we move on to the next one? Somebody did just text me. If you guys, I understand it's the middle of the day for you, so it's not the most convenient time. I completely understand. And next month when I move to New York, we'll all be on a much closer schedule. So if you need to leave, just feel free, go ahead and leave. No problem with that. So any questions? I'm just looking, these other two questions that have already been posted, I'll get to in just a moment. Okay, so let's move on and talk about the structure of thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormones are basically derivatives of the amino acid tyrosine. So tyrosine is an amino acid that can be taken in via food. And so if you eat proteins, eat meats, you're going to be getting plenty of tyrosine in your body. And that's going to be your first building block that you need to build thyroid hormone. Then what happens is, so you basically put two of your tyrosine molecules together. And then the next big building block that you have to have is iodine. So on each thyroid hormone molecule, you have either 4 iodines, so you can have 1, 2, 3, 4 on either corner. That makes your T4 molecule. This can then also be converted into T3, where you basically have 3 iodines on the outside of the molecule. You can also get this sort of dastardly molecule called reverse T3. You don't want reverse T3 because T3 is your most potent version. Reverse T3 takes off basically the wrong iodine molecule, and you can't have any function after that. So 2 tyrosines linked together with your iodines on the outside of your aromatic rings. So the large majority of your thyroid hormone that is secreted from your thyroid is T4, but T3 is considerably more active than the other. So some T3 is converted, but the bulk of it is done via removing one of those iodines in one of the peripheral tissues. So these tissues, especially the liver and kidney, take off one of those iodines, ensuring that you have the most active form of thyroid hormone. So you can also get that reverse T3, which you don't want. You've basically taken off the wrong iodine. Thyroid hormone is poorly soluble in water. So iodine itself is not, it's a huge atom. And then you've got your hydrophobic amino acids with these big, huge atoms attached to it. So it's going to be poorly soluble in water, which means that it is much more soluble in fats, so as are essential oils. So more than 99% of T3 and T4 in the body is actually carried around in the blood using a thyroxine binding globulin. So what that means is you have a carrier molecule that kind of carries around all of your thyroid hormone, because if it was all just free floating around in the blood, it could easily hit target after target after target and get your system revved up too high. So you have thyroxine binding globulin that helps to carry it around and further regulate the impact of the thyroid hormone on the body. So there are 2 other carriers, transferrin and albumin, but these represent less than 1% of the overall pool of what is being carried. So free hormones are released from these binding globulins, and then they can be taken up by our target cells. So yes, Dagmar, you are correct. thyroid hormone is more soluble in fat than in water. It does not like to be dissolved in water. It's a much more fatty molecule. So, okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, so let's talk more in depth about how thyroid hormone is governed and how it's regulated. So how do we make sure that we've got enough without having too much? So, hang on, I see one more question. Let me see what this is. Yes, Elizabeth, I promise you I'll get to that when I get to the essential oils question. I've got all of that in there. So I'll get to essential oils in a minute. Let's just finish out this sort of basic core science, and then we'll move on to the individual topics. So to get more thyroid hormone in your blood, the hypothalamus, which is a structure in your brain, releases thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone, okay? So TRH. So TRH then travels to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland secretes thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone then goes to the thyroid gland, which is a butterfly-shaped gland right on the front of your neck. If you can grab your trachea, that's that cartilaginous windpipe that you've got right there, and then sitting right on top of that is your thyroid gland. And that's why when people have overactive thyroid, or if they have goiter, why they get those big bulges on the front of their neck. So your pituitary talks to your thyroid gland and says make T3 and T4. So remember, most of what's going to be secreted is T4, and then there is going to be T3 converted primarily in the kidneys and the liver. So thyroid hormones are created from something called thyroglobulin. And this is a protein. So now this is the second instance that we have said we need protein in the diet in order to have optimal thyroid balance. So we have thyroid hormones are created from thyroglobulins, which are proteins within a certain space within the thyroid gland. So can't even speak. Thyroglobulin contains 123 units of tyrosine. So again, tyrosine, that amino acid, is going to be a critical building block to ensuring that you have optimum thyroid balance. These tyrosine molecules then react with iodine within that follicular space inside the thyroid, and it starts to take things up. Iodine is critical to the production of thyroid hormone. So iodine travels in the blood as a charged species called iodide. So iodide is then taken up into these follicular cells inside the thyroid by a transporter. And this transporter is important because we have a further opportunity to enhance our diet with things like selenium, which is critical for this transporter being able to pick up iodine. So this is an ion channel on the cell membrane, and it basically picks up an iodide from the blood and spits back out 2 sodiums on the other side. So it basically transports so that you can move your electrical currency across the two. In the follicular space, iodide is then oxidized to iodine, and the iodine is much more reactive, and this is what causes it to bind to those tyrosine units so that you can create that double molecule of thyroid hormone. So you have all of that good stuff going on right there in your thyroid. So when the follicular cells get a signal, so remember we start at the hypothalamus, we go to the pituitary pituitary secretes thyroid stimulating hormone. It talks to these follicular cells. When those follicular cells get the signal, they cause thyroglobulin to be absorbed from the follicular space, and it cuts that thyroglobulin. So remember how there were the 123 molecules of tyrosine? Well, we just want to cut off a couple of those, and we start to make T4, T3, trace amounts of your reverse T3, and then some other precursors to thyroid hormones, but not, it's almost negligible how much it is. So 80 to 90% of what you secrete is going to be T4, and then 10 to 20% is going to be T3. So, and then you go out into your blood, and that's where you cut off one of those iodines, and this is what gives you the major source of T3 in your peripheral tissues. So as we've said, thyroid stimulating hormone or thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone from the hypothalamus talks to the anterior pituitary, stimulates our thyrotrophs and our follicular cells in the thyroid to start making T4. So, and again, if we get too much, it goes back up and says stop making thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone and gives a different signal. Here is some interesting things about this process. We would like to think that it's all just clean cut, but there actually are some things that can impact this. So number one, if you are exposed to extreme cold, you will increase your production of thyroid stimulating hormone releasing hormone. Because remember, thyroid hormone is really good at warming you up. And so that's one way that your body controls its internal body temperature. So if you're in extreme cold, you're going to make more thyroid hormone releasing hormone, and that's going to stimulate things like shivering, which will warm you up, as well as causing all of your hair to stand on end, which is, I mean, humans have really crappy fur compared to all of our animal counterparts. But in some of our animal counterparts, this standing up of fur is very, very critical to governing thermobalance. In addition to being suppressed in thyroid hormone, so if you have enough thyroid hormone, you're going to stop making TSH. You also, if you have way too much dopamine, way too much somatostatin, which is just another hormone that governs growth, and if you have too much somatostatin, you can grow too much and have giantism, etc. And if you have too much glucocorticoids, you're going to stop the action of thyroid hormones. So this is another way that we regulate our thyroid hormone balance. Okay, so I'm going to come and answer some of these questions. So Sherry, we have loads of food, so I'll get to that during the food section. And then Yvonne, your sister needs to keep her TSH levels low, but doesn't like the way medications make her feel. So let's remember that none of the products that we're talking about today are labeled to replace medicine. So we need to be very careful. None of the advice that I'm giving you suggests that we can replace medicines. If your sister is taking a medicine and she doesn't like the way it makes her feel, my number one guess would be that her dose is wrong. There are doses of thyroid hormones in just about everywhere along the spectrum. So if you're not liking the way it makes you feel, if your heart rate gets too high, if you start getting hot, menstrual period changes, etc., it's a sign that your dose is too high and you need to go back and get your thyroid hormone monitored. Since I've had a couple of people ask about essential oils, Can you use the same essential oil daily? You absolutely can. I have seen no evidence to suggest that essential oils build any type of tolerance or immunity. Now, you may find that as you get older, you have a different response to an essential oil. Whereas an essential oil that you've tolerated for years and years, all of a sudden it starts to give you maybe a rash. That's not necessarily demonstrating that there is, it's not demonstrating that there is an immunity or a tolerance to that oil. It is simply that our skin metabolism dramatically changes as we get older. So we have a lot of metabolizing enzymes on our skin, and the levels of those tend to go down over time. This can also be true in older men because testosterone suppresses the immune system. If as men go through andropause as they get older, as the immune system starts to ramp up a little bit, this can actually increase the risk for skin reactions. So I don't think that I've ever seen any evidence that an essential oil can cause a true tolerance in the sense that you need increasingly more and more and more to have the same effect. You may find that you need more to have the same effect, but it's not necessarily because of tolerance, but because of changing metabolic processes in the body. Okay, any other questions before we go on? So we've talked a lot. Hi, no, Karen, at the moment we're just listening along. And so there's no slides to be seen. And so I actually wanted y'all's advice on the end of this. What would be the best way to make these slides? So I can show you what slides I have made, but they're not going to elucidate much. I just encourage you, because it's just like a slide that says interactions with other hormones. So there's not much on it yet. So just listen along. And if, like I said, if I say anything that's unclear, just feel free to write in. And all of this scripting that I'm speaking from will be available on the website tomorrow. So you can come back and reread if you're more of a visual learner versus an auditory learner. Okay, let's talk about interactions with other hormones. So one of the most important hormone interactions is with calcitonin. So the thyroid hormone, the thyroid gland also produces the hormone calcitonin. And calcitonin, if you just remember calcitonin, it tones down calcium in the blood. That's its main job, is to tone down calcium in the blood. So remember, your thyroid hormone is being made in your follicular cells. In Latin, para means beside. So if we want to say beside the follicular cells, we have parafollicular cells. Remember, we already talked about how paracrine action is where you secrete and then you do something really close to it. You turn on a cell really close to it. That's paracrine. So beside the follicular cells, we have our parafollicular cells, and these produce calcitonin in response to high blood calcium. Calcitonin decreases the release of calcium from bones by stopping the actions of osteoclasts. So osteoclasts kind of chew up bone so that you can be sure to have plenty of calcium in your blood. Bone, we think of bone as like some stagnant object, but it's not true. Bone is constantly being built and broken down and built and broken down. And this is because this allows us to maintain our blood calcium level at a normal rate. So this calcium level is toned down by stopping the action of bone breakdown, because bone breakdown, it puts calcium into the blood. So the effects of calcitonin are opposite of those of the parathyroid hormones. So beside the thyroid, parathyroid, we have two glands that secrete PTH. PTH, or parathyroid hormone, is responsible for doing the opposite. It causes bone breakdown to occur so that you can raise the amount of calcium in the blood. So calcitonin seems far less essential than PTH because you can actually take out your thyroid and leave in those parathyroid glands, and you still have normal bone metabolism. So parathyroid hormone being normal is going to be very, very important for bone health. The most common place that parathyroid hormone gets out of balance is when people have kidney disease, and this leads to all kinds of problems in both the metabolism of calcium as well as the metabolism of phosphorus. And so if you're someone with kidney disease, you may want to start talking to your physician early about bone health, because there's a lot that can go terribly awry with bone health and kidney disease. Okay, so that is the interaction between the thyroid, the parathyroid glands, and calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. We also know that thyroid hormone can interact with progesterones and estrogens. So in postmenopausal women, or in women who have had a total hysterectomy and had their ovaries removed, they typically will take some sort of estrogen and progesterone supplement. So this supplementation actually increases your need for thyroid hormone. So if you are a woman who had a normal thyroid all of her life and then either had a total hysterectomy or went through menopause, you may find that supplementation with some herbs that support the thyroid can really be helpful in maintaining normal energy levels and normal brain function, etc., after menopause. So this is because estrogen and progesterone increases the level of circulating thyroxine binding globulin. That's that carrier molecule that carries things around the body. And therefore you decrease the amount of free T4 that's free from that binding molecule and can then interact with your cellular receptors. So if you increase your amount of your binding globulin, you're going to have more of this stuck on versus being free to work. So if you're a person who has been on maybe something like levothyroxine, you may find that after menopause, the doses of that need to change because your estrogen and progesterone levels are changing. In women who have normal thyroid function, changes in estrogen progesterone levels can actually change the pituitary thyroid axis. So even if someone has a normal thyroid function, simply changing the levels of sex steroids can impact thyroid function. Okay, Karen, so Endoflex, I too have found can cause some rashes. So even though it is compounded in a sesame oil carrier, it simply just causes some rashes in some people. Always feel free, you guys have heard me say it once, you'll hear me say it a million times again, feel free to dilute in additional carrier oil. And so, go for that. And there's no rule written in stone that you have to put an essential oil directly onto your throat. That is a more sensitive area of skin. Almost all of your skin around the entire body is going to be equally permeable to essential oils. So feel free, put it on a forearm, rub it on a belly. Don't feel like you have to put it right onto that sensitive area right on the throat. You also can dilute anytime that you need it. And then Karen, if you're starting to have adverse reactions after the addition of Thyromin, you may be getting just too high levels. I can tell you from doing some research on Thyromin, this is not a benign supplement, and it is not for every single person. So you may find that your levels are just getting too high. You may say, well, how do I know if my levels are too high? I encourage you, if you're going to be really messing with a lot of your thyroid system, go get it checked. Just go get your TRH, your TSH, your free T4, free T3, all of it checked. Because some people ask me like, well, I just want to start it. And I'm like, well, why do you want to start it? Well, I think it'll make me feel better. You actually, because you've got such potent ingredients in a supplement like Thyromin, I don't want you to do harm to yourself. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I was about to say my own personal experiment. And by that, I mean taking this supplement myself. My own personal experience is Thyromin's a bit too strong for me. My thyroid is balanced. I don't struggle with my weight. I don't struggle with being too hot all the time. I have relatively normal menstrual periods. I don't necessarily need the Thyromin. So just be aware that this is not a benign supplement for you to take. So Karen, that's an interesting story. So the radioactive iodine following Graves' disease. So again, it's going to be really important for you. If you're choosing to supplement with something like Thyromin, you really need to go and get your thyroid levels checked, especially if you're combining something like Thyromin alongside a levothyroxine or an Armour thyroid or etc. So good. And every year, when I was seeing patients in thyroid clinic, if their thyroid was going like this, I would check it every month. So if you're still struggling and you can't quite get it in balance, go much more frequently than once a year. Even going once a month, if you've got levels that are going like this, could be good just to balance it all out. So Sherry, that's interesting. So Thyromin, remember, we've talked about how thyroid hormone is responsible for our heat response. And so getting a side effect like thyroid may, I've never personally heard this. However, anything can happen when you supplement. I actually recommend, so especially if you're getting heartburn from when you take it and then you lay down, I personally, and this is just my opinion, take it or leave it, I encourage you, take the Thyromin in the morning before you eat anything. Personally, if I take Thyromin right before bedtime, I'm going to be laying in bed with like these big wide eyes all night long. And I'm being like, ooh, I need to do stuff. I need to get out of bed. I need to do stuff. For me, it is not a supplement I can take at night. I have heard the opposite from other people, that they love taking it at night and waking up in the morning. However, we know from medications like levothyroxine or Armour thyroid, consistently, each and every time, the recommendation is to take it before you eat anything in the morning. Sherry, if all of your labs are normal, what we may have is some subtle mineral imbalances. So let's move on. And well, I'm going to answer Bobby's question first. And so, pay attention when I get down to the minerals and the vitamins that are critically important, because You guys know I'm a flag waving member of the Take More Minerals Society, and the same information applies to thyroid balance. So Bobby, is there any harm in taking Endoflex if you've never had levels tested? So my research suggests that there's actually very few essential oils that have any type of impact on TSH, T3, T4. So I don't see any harm in potentially doing it. Just pay attention to your body. Like I said, if you're getting too hot, too cold, changing menstrual periods, changing hair, all of those types of things can be signs of imbalance. And so if you go further towards an imbalance after starting something like an Endoflex, you may want to back off. And there's nothing wrong in trying something and then saying, this is not for me. This is not perfect. So let's move on and talk about some signs of underactivity of the thyroid and overactivity of the thyroid. So signs of underactivity can be things like trouble sleeping, tiredness, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, dry skin, dry hair, depression, constantly feeling cold and having sensitivity to cold temperatures. Frequent heavy periods are a sign of thyroid underactivity, as well as joint and muscle pains, especially joint and muscle pains that you just can't explain based on anything. The most common form of thyroid imbalance globally is called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It sounds all scary, but it is the #1 cause of low thyroid. So what happens in Hashimoto's thyroiditis is that it's an autoimmune disease that attacks the thyroid and causes it not to make enough thyroid hormone. So interestingly, as I was studying the Eastern medicine approaches to balancing out the thyroid, in Eastern medicine, thyroid imbalance is simply, it's a symptom. It's not a disease. It's not the core issue. The core issue is underlying and trapped with other types of problems. So with Hashimoto's, we specifically see this because if you have Hashimoto's, you are much, much more likely to have another concomitant autoimmune disorder. So people who have celiac disease are more likely to have Hashimoto's. People who have type 1 diabetes, more likely to have Hashimoto's. People who have vitiligo or alopecia, much more likely to have Hashimoto's. So again, a lot of those go back to the gut as well as genetics. So we do see a strong genetic component with Hashimoto's. And so in twin studies, where you basically look at monozygotic twins, where you have one egg that's been fertilized by where you have one egg that's been fertilized by one sperm and then split so that the twins have the exact same genetic code. So in people who have Hashimoto's, there's about a 38 to 55% concordance, meaning that if your identical twin has Hashimoto's, there's about a 40 to 50% chance that you will have it as well. Interestingly, there is an even higher concordance in people who have circulating thyroid antibodies. You could get up to 80% of identical twins that if one has circulating antibodies for the thyroid, the other one will too. This result is not the same if you have dizygotic twins, where you have either one egg fertilized by two sperm or two eggs each fertilized by one sperm, where your siblings, your twins, only share half of their genetic code. So you have a very high degree of genetic heritability with Hashimoto's. We also know that there are genes encoded. And so you have your, what's called your, I'm going to type it out for you. The oh no, I'm going to type it out for you if I can see it. The CTLA4 gene, which is the cytotoxic T lymphocyte antigen 4 gene. So you have what are called polymorphisms in this gene. And this is basically where you're supposed to have one base pair and you have a different one. And so it changes the genetic structure. So you have this CTLA4 gene that downregulates your T lymphocytes. It inhibits your T lymphocytes. And so if you have a family history of thyroid disorders, you can be very strongly implicated in potentially having this genetic polymorphism in this particular gene. If you don't have any of that, you go, Lindsay, I don't have any family history of hypothyroidism. It's just me. What is going on? Well, there are a lot of mineral deficiencies. So selenium we will see as a critical building block to ensuring that we can have adequate thyroid function. You also can get hypothyroidism from either too little iodine intake or too high iodine intake. So both of those can cause hypothyroidism, and both of those can cause goiter. As we'll see in an upcoming section, up to 95% of hypothyroidism used to be associated with iodine deficiency, which is why in the United States we have iodized salts. Now, I'm sure all of you guys are crunchy, earthy mamas out there, and you go, but Lindsay, I don't use iodized salt, I use mineral salt. And that's okay. We can get it from other places in our diet as well as in our supplements. So preventable environmental factors such as too much or too little iodine, too little selenium, as well as certain diseases and medications. And we'll go over those medications in a moment. So that's Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. Think cold and tired are the symptoms of hypothyroidism. So what about if you're hyperthyroid? Well, you're going to be hot, going a mile a minute, sweating, just not feeling good at all. So hyperthyroidism is much likelier to cause things like anxiety, irritability, and moodiness, nervousness, hyperactivity, sweating, trembling, hair loss, and missed or light menstrual periods. So the opposite of what we saw with hypothyroidism. At the extreme of hyperthyroidism, we have Graves' disease. Graves' disease is not nearly as well defined why people get it. So the exact cause of Graves' disease is unclear, but it is believed to be involved with a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So there is a theory that states that excessive stress is most likely the primary trigger for the onset of Graves' disease. However, more clinical trials are needed to decide if this is going to be the overall etiology. There's also evidence that things like infection, especially infection with a bug called Yersinia, which is, it's not Yersinia pestis, it's Yersinia enterocolictica. I think I said that correctly. It's similar actually to the bug that causes the plague, believe it or not. So this can ramp up our thyroid. You can use medications such as methimazole and PTU, but a lot of people choose not to take these medicines and opt for radioactive iodine treatment or having a thyroidectomy. And that's because methimazole and PTU both cause like really gnarly side effects, one of which is called agranulocytosis, where you basically just knock out your bone marrow from being able to produce any of your immune cells. So that's bad, because if you knock out all of your immune cells, you've basically knocked out all of your immune system. So in people who have had Graves' disease and radioactive iodine treatment or thyroidectomy, you are most likely going to be on some type of thyroid medicine or thyroid supplement. If you're lucky, you're most likely going to be on some type of thyroid medicine for the rest of your life. So if you've made that decision, don't beat yourself up about it. It is a decision that some people have to make to do that, but just be aware that you're going to have some sort of supplementation. So why do these imbalances occur? Well, we've already mentioned infection, genetics, etc. But another thing can also cause a lot of these problems, and that is stress. Stress completely jacks your entire thyroid system. So if you are under chronic stress with your cortisol levels jacked way up, it's not good, because what's happening is you suppress your thyroid stimulating hormone, you decrease your conversion of T4 to T3, you increase your production of that reverse T3, that T3 that doesn't work, and you decrease your ability of your good thyroid hormone to hit onto a cellular receptor. So in other words, you basically take out the whole system. So step one in restoring optimum thyroid balance is going to be ensuring that you are not under chronic stress. So tomorrow, when you see all these videos go up, you will also see a brief 10-minute yoga session that I do with some yoga poses that are good for the thyroid, can be also very good at helping with stress. Medicines, as I mentioned, can also mess up the thyroid. So PTU, if you take PTU and have a normal thyroid, you're going to suppress your thyroid function. Then you also have some sulfa drugs, amiodarone, which is a pretty common medicine for atrial fibrillation. Amiodarone has a bunch of iodines attached to it, and so it gets in and it competes with the uptake of iodine at the level of the thyroid. And what happens is it picks up the wrong iodine, and instead of having iodide that it needs to build thyroxine and to build your T3 and T4, it goes, what do I do with this amiodarone? I don't know what to do with that. And so amiodarone can really mess things up. Lithium can inhibit the release of thyroid hormone. And then some of your epileptic medicines, phenytoin, phenobarbital, and carbamazepine, they all interact. And then rifampin just chews through everything, every drug, everything. It induces the metabolism of everything, including thyroid hormone. So also ions, because you're trying to pull that negatively charged iodide out of your blood, pick it up into the thyroid. Ions such as thiocyanate, which is found in very high concentrations in cigarette smoke, as well as perchlorate, which if you saw my Detox Your Home lecture, you saw that is an ingredient common in household cleaners. Those inhibit the body's ability to take up iodide, and then they actually directly inhibit thyroid hormone balance. So you've got all of those big things that can interact. So what can we do to restore balance? How you guys doing? I haven't seen any questions come through in a bit. You doing okay? Just let me know if there's any other things that I can answer. So what about essential oils? Well, the data related to essential oils in protecting the thyroid, supporting thyroid balance is not great. So I went through loads of different essential oils trying to find some actual clear-cut data that essential oils could do X, Y, or Z. I didn't find a lot. I did find a couple of things. One was a study in people undergoing radioactive thyroid ablation. So we can talk about this study because we're not talking about treating a disease. We're simply talking about maintaining healthy cells in the face of really trying to take out cells. So radioactive thyroid, radioactive iodine ablation, what it does is you take radioactive iodine and put it on top of the thyroid. And that iodine gets taken up into the thyroid and kills it, because it takes it up because it recognizes like, hey, it's iodine, it's my friend. And then it's like, haha, I am the dastardly radioactive version of iodine. And it kills the thyroid. So what happens is that radioactivity can sometimes damage healthy cells around the thyroid that you don't want them to damage. One that very commonly gets damaged is the salivary glands. So the salivary glands are what makes moisture in our mouth. And it can be absolute hell on earth for people who don't have good saliva function, because just imagine day in and day out, just chronic dry mouth. So there was a study that looked at a blend of 1 milliliter of lemon essential oil alongside half a milliliter of ginger essential oil. And it was found that just inhalation of those around the time of radioactive iodine treatment can help to protect healthy cells in the salivary glands and protect the function of those. So that's one thing that's been shown to do. There's also an essential oil that I had never heard of that I don't know if I can pronounce or not. I'm gonna show it to you to show you how silly this word is. And prize goes to who can say it. Skazitstanika. What is that? Somebody who speaks like Russian or Polish is going to have to tell me what that is, all those K's and H's. So Skazitstanika essential oil. So that is a distilled essential oil. And what it has found is when it is combined with vitamin E, it produces a good antioxidant response that is useful in hyperthyroid patients. So people who have hyperthyroidism tend to utilize and chew through a lot of their glutathione. And we know that glutathione is absolutely critical for ensuring that we don't have excessive toxicity in our bodies. So this this essential oil, SKEO, however we say it, so prize to whoever can say it, alongside vitamin E, helps to compensate for the decline in glutathione that is very common in people who have hyperthyroidism. So any other questions? So Dagmar, the question is, it's 1 milliliter of lemon and half a milliliter of ginger. And it was simply inhaled around the time of radioactive thyroid treatment. So I know probably most people on this call are members of Young Living. So I did go through, I looked for every single essential oil that was in EndoFlex. So I looked for, the spearmint, the sesame, sage, myrtle, German chamomile, nutmeg, and geranium. And I did not find any data related to those specifically for the support of thyroid. So if you go, why did I sign up for this crap? Lindsay, I thought you were going to give me better data than that. remember, it's just like we talked about last month with wild yam extract. Wild yam extract, the data is all over the place. Some of the studies say it's great. Some of the studies say it's worthless. The anecdotal reports that we hear about the wild yam infused products that Young Living sells, such as Progessence Plus, are astonishing. The reports that I hear about Endoflex, aside from the rash on the front of the throat, which is a real concern, So it's one of those things, like sometimes data is not everything. And if you're a pharmacist or a physician or a nurse or, somebody who's super, super data driven, I accept it. You can call me a pseudoscientist, but sometimes I agree. Essential oils are magic and they just work. So Karen, this is a great question. So I'm going to show you guys something really quickly. So let me share my screen with you and let me look and show you how I would go about looking at this. So number one, I went and I looked for thyroid and essential oil. So this is pubmed.gov, and if you've never used this, I very strongly encourage you to use this, because if you're on this call right now and you've been here the whole time, chances are you're a high green like me and you love your data. So what we can do is, and I won't be able to click into any of these probably, because if we come across anything, so we don't have cystis, but let's look for, I don't want Google Scholar, so cystis, Latin name. And let's just see if we can take a step back. I'm going to double check on YL's website and just make sure that I am pulling the correct Latin name, because that one that I just saw doesn't ring a bell. Come on, you got this. Nope, I was wrong. It happens. So PubMed is a great resource for figuring out, and this is not going to be helpful at all because it's going to be the same Latin name. But that's where I would start in trying to find this type of information, is in pubmed.gov. And then it's not always perfect. And so let's just see if we just pull up and see what kind of research there is. So you could go through and start looking through these to find out if there is any information out there. You know, the effects of feeding lambs with rock roses. You never know what you're going to find. Crazy stuff comes up. So that's where I would start, because Karen had never heard that cystis can help support the thyroid. And let's remember, as we're marketing, unless it's labeled as a vitality oil, we're not able to make any structure function claims. And so if you did find some data and you wanted to recommend cystis to someone, remember that it's just going to have that lovely aromatic experience and blah, 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 because you can't make all the product claims that you might want to. So let's start talking now about foods that can support the thyroid and also foods that can kind of mess up the thyroid. So number one, you're going to need foods that are high in proteins. Proteins are the initial building blocks of the structure of thyroid hormone. High quality protein is strongly recommended. My personal preference is to always get it from vegetable sources instead of animal sources. However, if you have kidney disease, you need to be very careful how much protein that you are currently taking in, because believe it or not, the more protein that you eat, the lower your kidney function goes, because your kidney has to do a lot of work to get rid of that protein. So for me, I will swear by it till the end of my days. Spirulina. Get you some spirulina. So more protein than any other food on the planet. So, forget a steak, forget a chicken, go get some of this microalgae that not only is hugely dense in protein, but also amazingly rich in iodine, which you're going to need to support your thyroid, as well as so many other critical micronutrients. So, Karen, I don't know much about eating according to blood type. If you want to give it a go, more power to you. And Laura, I want to hear all about these green chickpeas. Tell a flexitarian more over here. Other vegetarian sources of protein: lentils, seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds. I just read last week that flax seeds are going to kill us all because they're packed full of cyanide. Don't believe everything that you read. I can explain it another day, but come on, peeps. Flax seeds don't kill us all. Quinoa, nutritional yeast. Recommend nutritional yeast if you don't have any problems with yeast overgrowth at baseline. However, if you're struggling with a candida infused gut, number one, get you some probiotics, and number two, stick away from adding more yeast in. Nuts, beans, and then organic non-GMO tofu, tempeh, and seitan are also really amazing. So you need protein, step one. Step two is you gotta have iodine. As I mentioned before, up to 95% of thyroid deficiency before the iodination of salt was caused by iodine deficiency. On the other hand, in people who have enough thyroid hormone, if you take too much iodine above the tolerable upper level of intake, you can actually increase your risk for thyroid disorders. So this is one piece of caution that I give you for Thyromin. So Thyromin, which is a Young Living supplement, has a very, very high level of iodine. So if you are someone who is normal with your thyroid, you may choose, instead of taking 2 capsules, just take 1. Just take 1, because you don't want to be taking super high levels of iodine over time. You're not only getting iodine from potassium iodide, but you're also getting it from kelp as well as from parsley in this supplement. So we do know that in people who live in areas where seaweed consumption is very high, so in Japan, for example, the average dietary intake of iodine is between 1,000 and 3,000 micrograms of iodine a day. And this can actually lead to iodine-induced goiter and iodine-induced hypothyroidism. And all of that can actually be reversed by restricting seaweed intake. So 1,100 is about the upper limit for people who are normal. And then in people who are taking more than that, you run the risk of getting a hypothyroidism associated with it. Prolonged exposure to more than 18,000 micrograms a day. So that's a lot. That's 18 times what's considered the upper limit of normal. Strongly increases the risk of goiter in adults, and in newborns can cause iodine-induced goiter and hypothyroidism. And this can be caused from exposure to both high iodine in the diet, as well as high iodine in antiseptics. So if you've ever seen somebody getting prepped for surgery and they're getting all that brown liquid, that's iodine that they're rubbing on there, and that iodine gets readily absorbed across the skin. Okay, so Dagmar, great question. Confused about soy. I've heard that soy is not good for hormone balance. My personal opinion is it's not the soy's fault. Soy has had so much bad stuff done to it over time that it's no longer the plant that it used to be. So I personally choose to eat soy, especially because I choose to avoid meat more days than I eat meat. However, if I were working with someone who is perhaps on their second remission of an estrogen-linked cancer, I would probably think it's a reasonable suggestion to have them avoid soy-containing products. However, if that's not you and you're not experiencing big old mood swings associated with soy, it can be a good part of a normal, healthy diet. It's just up to you to pay attention to your body. You will be getting phytoestrogens from it. So up to you whether or not you choose to use those phytoestrogens as a part of the diet. So it's not necessarily misinformation. It just depends on what the study was, what was done in the study, whether or not they use GMO soy. Any plant with a terminator gene in it, in my opinion, is a bad plant. And soy is meant to be grown around diverse crops. And so I'm very much in favor of diversification of species. So if you haven't yet, I encourage you, go to www.seedsnow.com and get some non-GMO soybean seeds, and let's help preserve this species from going extinct forever and always. You know, the other thing about GMO soy is that it's very, very heavily sprayed with pesticides and herbicides throughout its entire life. And if you've been, especially to the Midwest of the United States these days, and you look at the soil, it's devoid of nutrition. So you're getting something that's really devoid of nutrition. So anyways, yes, it's probably, it's a bit exaggerated. It's all over the place, but the more that we can avoid GMOs and vote with our fork, the better I think it is. And so, yeah. All right. Do other Young Living supplements contain iodine? Nisha Nitro does for sure. It's not disclosed on the label, but it actually has a pretty good bit. And so if you're somebody like me who sometimes has a 3 nitro a day kind of day, and you're also taking Thyromin, just use some caution with that. And then the master formula, I don't believe has much, if any, iodine in it. And then in mineral essence, as you mentioned, it isn't disclosed on the label exactly what the spectrum is, but you do probably get some iodine out of it. So the only things disclosed on the label are calcium, magnesium, chloride, sodium, potassium, sulfate, lithium, and boron. So be careful. We've already mentioned how lithium can interact with thyroid function. So just be careful with that supplement if you are really struggling to balance out your thyroid. On the other hand, mineral essence is a life-changing supplement for a lot of people. Jenny, so I actually don't know off the top of my head a normal iodine level, especially in the urine. So I would need to look that up. And so it sounds, but I do know, where's this in my notes? So I do know that the average adult needs about 150 micrograms a day, and then 220 micrograms in pregnant and breastfeeding, pregnant women, as well as breastfeeding women need even more. They need 290 micrograms. And so that's how much you need to take in through the diet. But I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head what the normal levels would be in urine. So we need iodine, basically, is what we've said. So what foods have iodine? Well, seaweeds. If you don't eat seaweeds, please, I very strongly encourage you to eat seaweed. In Chinese medicine, there is almost nothing that can't be made better by inclusion of seaweed. You also have things like codfish, cranberries, navy beans, potatoes, yogurt, strawberries, cheeses, and parsley. Selenium. Do not underestimate the role of selenium in so many different processes in your body. Selenium is critical to providing thyroid hormone balance because it helps to build selenoproteins, and these selenoproteins govern hormone balance between your thyroid hormones as well as your reproductive hormones. They also are critical for DNA synthesis and protection against oxidative damage. So really, you can't, it's hard to take too much selenium. I'm sure if there's a nutritionist on the call, they would tell us what the risks are. But in general, you want to eat no less than 55 milligrams of selenium a day in the average adult, and 60 milligrams in pregnant women and 70 milligrams in lactating women. My favorite selenium containing supplement from Young Living is ImmuPro. I absolutely love ImmuPro. And then foods that are high in selenium are things like Brazil nuts, yellowfin tuna, halibut, spinach, and eggs. So you have lots of different options there. So, all right, hang on, and I'll give you the selenium information. So the next thing that you need in order to balance out the thyroid is you need to be aware of foods that are called goitrogens. So goitrogens are substances. They could be drugs, they could be chemicals, they could be foods, but they interrupt your thyroid hormone balance by interfering with iodine uptake into the thyroid gland. So this triggers the thyroid to release TSH, which then promotes the growth of thyroid tissue, and this can potentially lead to goiter. The good thing is in foods, cooking inactivates your goitrogens. So just be sure to cook any of the foods that contain goitrogens if you have any type of thyroid imbalance. The number one grouping of foods that contain goitrogens are the Brassica family. So these are your cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, collard greens, as well as things like bok choy, broccolini, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, horseradish, kale, kohlrabi, mustard greens, rapini, rutabagas, turnips, etc. So just be sure that you're cooking those really well. Cassava melon, the goitrogens can be inactivated by crushing and soaking them before. And then, as we said, as we were talking about earlier, soybeans do both. They do great things, and then they have the potential to cause harm. And so soybeans, such as tofu, soybean oil, soybean flour, soy lecithin, etc., can interact with your body's ability to uptake iodine. Pine seeds, as well as those flax seeds that are going to kill us all, those can all lead to goitrogenic activity. And then strawberries, spinach, bamboo shoots, and sweet potatoes are also included in this. Laura, don't worry too much. Give yourself grace and go, you eat according to what is good for you. Because if you're suffering from significant thyroid imbalance, you may want to discuss that with whoever your nutritionist is. And I encourage you, if you really want to get serious about treating cancer naturally, look up Dr. Gerson. Some people say he's a hack. I say he's not, because so Dr. Gerson published a case report back in the 1920s or 30s from curing 50 people of cancers, including very, very difficult to treat cancers, using fresh pressed juice and diet. And the United States American Medical Association was nice enough to take his license to practice medicine and kick him out of the country. So I encourage you to look him up, and there's loads of amazing documentaries about his work and his patients. He's passed on now, but his daughter is still alive, carrying on the legacy, and there are a lot of Gerson practitioners out there as well. So Awesome. Yes, Laura, that's so good because I personally love Dr. Gerson. I've got some beet juice sitting right over there that I'm going to drink when I get done from this. Any other questions about diet? If not, we're going to move on and talk about Eastern medicine concepts of the thyroid. So as I mentioned before, in Chinese medicine, the thyroid is simply a symptom. When the thyroid's out of balance, it's just a symptom that something else underlying is out of balance. And so Eastern medicine doesn't actually give much information about how to balance the thyroid using Eastern medicine treatments. There's lots of different Chinese herbs out there that I am not competent enough to share with you. But if you have a skilled Eastern medicine herbalist, they may be able to lead you down a much clearer path. What I found to be the most informative from the Eastern medicine perspectives are some of the emotional components. So this is the first step that we're going to look at emotions. So in Chinese medicine, imbalances of the thyroid are caused by disturbances in the qi that is caused by sorrow and anger. Sorrow and anger cause the liver and the spleen qi to become disharmonious. And this causes a moist sputum to coagulate around the neck, further causing that repression of the sorrow and anger. This causes that first symptom of swelling of the neck, which is the first symptom of thyroid imbalance. So if you're someone who is suffering from sorrow or anger, we got to release it. You know, the opposite of anger is laughter. If you're angry at something, just laugh at it instead. When your children piss you off, just laugh at them and it will make life better. I promise. So you also can use foods that are drying to phlegm. And so the other piece of the Chinese medicine puzzle is an excess in heart fire. So when the heart has too much fire, it's often marked by becoming highly agitated quickly. Things like fright, mania, and panic, excessive insomnia are a part of the heart fire. And when you have too much heart fire, you end up burning off all of your yin. So the yin, if you remember from last month, is that cooling inward energy that allows the femininity to cool your body down. If you have really excessive heart fire, you can actually see it as a purpling of the skin on the neck. And that's because the blood vessels around the thyroid are bulging out. Lastly, in Chinese medicine, geography plays a big part. So if you live somewhere where there are loads and loads of goitrogenic foods, or there's a toxin in the environment that induces the thyroid, or if you live in an area that has iodine deficiency, all of those can cause issues. All right, we are rocking and rolling. So next, this is going to be a big section. So if you need to get up, move around, we've been sitting a long time. So let's talk about some supplements that can help to support the thyroid. Number one, L-tyrosine. So we talked about how tyrosine is the building block of thyroid hormone. So tyrosine is very important for the production of not only thyroid hormone, but also epinephrine and dopamine. So as we mentioned, thyroglobulin it requires 123 tyrosine molecules. So you're going to need some tyrosine. On the other hand, tyrosine can exacerbate hyperthyroidism conditions. So while it's a key building block, you don't need too much of it. Additionally, if you're taking MAO inhibitors, so monoamine oxidase inhibitors, you don't want to take any tyrosine because you're going to get a direct drug interaction, and those drug interactions can be really dangerous where you get heart palpitations and really a lot of anxiety, etc. Additionally, excuse me, went down the wrong pipe. Additionally, tyrosine can interfere with the absorption of medicines that look like amino acids. So for people who are taking levodopa for Parkinson's disease, don't need the tyrosine, or you really need to separate them one for another. So if you're choosing to use either of these, MAO inhibitors or levodopa or any other medicine that kind of looks like an amino acid, be sure to talk to your pharmacist about the signs that your medicine levels are too high or signs that your medicine levels are too low. The other thing about tyrosine is that long-term safety data is lacking. So some of the durations of study are only 2 weeks long. So we really don't know long-term how this affects us. Theoretically, tyrosine is great to take about 30 minutes before exercise, but there's really no great data to back this up. It's just anecdotally how people choose to use it. So use caution if you're using this one long-term. Okay, now, next supplement. Cysteine is a molecule that is charged, so it's got to be bound to something. And so then you have N-acetyl cysteine, which sticks on an acetyl group, or you have cysteine, where you put 2 cysteine molecules together. So cysteine is a precursor to glutathione, and it's an important source of sulfides in the body. So regardless of your thyroid health, so cysteine can aid in the chelation. That's kind of like the magnet that kind of sticks to heavy metals. And so it aids in the chelation of heavy metals, helps to produce normal reactions to inflammation, and disrupt biofilms that can be causing all kinds of problems in your body that you may not even know. It also can help to lower homocysteine levels. So if you're one of those people that has MTHFR, you're really at risk for having high homocysteine levels. Try supplementing with cysteine or cysteine. It's also a critical piece. So cysteine gets together with selenium and it forms selenocysteine, and this is a critical piece that helps to protect the thyroid from free radical damage. So that's a good one. Thyroid powder and adrenal and pituitary extracts are also included in a lot of thyroid supplements. Be aware, these things are not benign. They are potent supplements. So desiccated thyroid powder typically comes from a cow. Young Living supplement is from a cow. It comes in varying strengths from 8 milligrams to more than 300 milligrams. And Young Living's Thyromin is somewhere in the middle and contains about 100 milligrams of bovine, so that's cow, thyroid powder per dose. So that's 2 capsules. So these are not good for your vegetarian friends, not good for your Hindu friends. So just be aware if you're sharing this. And then also in Young Living's Thyromin is adrenal and pituitary extract from pig. So not good for your kosher friends, not good for your Muslim friends, and not good for your vegetarian friends. So be cognizant as you're sharing that's something that's in the right vein for that person. Yvonne, does Young Living have a supplement with glutamine? Somebody help a sister out. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but that, I can't think of everything off the top of my head as much as I would like to. So Dagmar, is Thyromin safe for people with Hashimoto's? So we can't say that it's beneficial because it's not labeled to treat any kind of disease. And so, I can't even address that. However, in people who choose to take it, they can choose to take it, and then to determine whether or not it is safe in that individual, you would simply need to monitor your blood pressure, heart rate, make sure that you're not having any signs and symptoms of overactivity. So yeah, it's totally up to the individual person, just like with other supplements. You know, you want to monitor with other supplements as well. Same thing goes for Thyroid. Lastly, or maybe not lastly, but iodine, we've really hit on iodine a lot. Iodine intake, moderate levels is recommended. If you have normal thyroid function, be careful. Don't overdo it with the iodine. Selenium, I'm a flag waving member of the Selenium Society. 3 different selenium-dependent iodothyronine deiodinases. That's a lot of way of saying, that's a big way of saying that selenium is critical for cutting off the iodine that helps to both activate and inactivate thyroid hormones. Selenium is a critical micronutrient for normal development, growth, and metabolism. Furthermore, selenium is found in that selenocysteine, which is at the catalytic center of all of your thyroid enzymes and helps to prevent them from free radical damage. So normal, healthy thyroids need a lot of selenium. Selenium deficiency can exacerbate the effects of iodine deficiency, and the same is true for vitamin A and iron. So you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of selenium, especially if you happen to have a diet that is high in thiocyanate or isoflavones, because these interfere with your micronutrient function. Next, we have taurine. So taurine may prevent damage to the thyroid from environmental toxins such as insecticides as well as lead. Spearmint extract has been shown to increase the weight of both the pituitary gland and the thyroid gland in both sexes of rats. So that's, you know, something to consider. If you've already got a goiter, spearmint is not what you want to be using in your teas. And there's no evidence to guide me this way, but my professional gut feeling is I would also avoid spearmint essential oil if I had an enlarged thyroid. Magnesium, B12, and zinc are all cofactors to produce TSH. Vitamin B2 and vitamin C are cofactors to the symporter that brings iodine into the thyroid. And then vitamin A and vitamin D must be present to adequately activate nuclear receptors. So back at the way very beginning, someone said that they were that they had vitamin D deficiency, and this absolutely could be a cause of why even with supplementation, with whatever, that your thyroid just cannot get in balance. So so thyroid, it can do everything that it's supposed to do, but if you don't have vitamin D, it can't activate those nuclear receptors, which start the metabolic processes. So be aware of that. And as I've mentioned in my videos about Master Formula, you really want to be sure that you're taking vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol instead of vitamin D2. So just be sure that you're not taking ergocalciferol, because with ergocalciferol, your levels rise, but then they plateau. With vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol, they continue to rise over time. And I am a huge advocate of magnesium. You can't really take enough of it. You just pee out what you don't need. Okay, next I will, I'm not going to tell you the yoga poses. You can just watch the video tomorrow with a couple of yoga poses for you to do. But I do want to give you some exercises if you feel like emotional imbalance is part of your issues with your thyroid. So I've given you the Chinese medicine perspective, but then there are several other theories about what is going on when the thyroid is out of balance. Number one is a conflict between your conscious and unconscious self. So, you know, if you're driving yourself to be someone other than who you really are, you could have issues with your thyroid. Lack of self-love, fear of self-expression, a deep sense of frustration or anxiety. And then anytime that people feel unprotected, this can be a sign of emotional condition that can predispose you to thyroid imbalance. So using a book that I really like called Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils. For something like frustration, Carolyn Mine recommends using lemon essential oil, placing it over the common bile duct on that upper right side of the body, and either meditating on the mantra, I move beyond my limitations, or in saying some phrases. So you place the oil in your left hand, circle it 3 times, inhale the oil, really feel everywhere in your body that that frustration is, and then repeat to yourself 3 times, I choose to release the trauma behind the emotion of frustration. I choose accomplishment. And so saying each of those phrases 3 times while really sensing where that frustration is coded in your very cells and allowing it to be released. Anxiety, placing joy essential oil over the capillary points that are sort of just right up under the breast. You've got 2 capillary points sort of right at your midline. And the mantra, peace, be still. And then again, put the joy in your left hand, circle it 3 times, inhale. I choose to release the trauma behind the emotion of anxiety. I choose confidence, and saying each of those 3 times. And then lastly, if you feel unprotected, placing time on your cellular memory trigger points, which are 2 points just above your umbilicus, and say affirmations and meditations like, my spiritual connection protects me. And then again, thyme essential oil, left hand, circle 3 times. I choose to release the trauma behind the emotion of feeling unprotected. I choose security. So, all right, I am open to take additional questions that you may have. I thank you very much for joining with me today. I'm honored to do my small part to empower your journey to wellness. And if you're not already, please follow me at The Pharmacist ALA on all social media channels, and then online at www.thepharmacistalabama.com. So if anyone has another question, feel free to unmute yourself, turn on your camera and speak to the group, or just type it in. And we'll just kind of give 30 seconds for somebody to decide if they want to be bold. Thank you, Melinda. Okay. All right. Well, if you feel like you have any follow-up questions, I provide customer care on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And I will get back to you. Karen, great question. Let's see. What's my mantra? I'm a boss. So for frustration, the mantra is, I move beyond my limitations. For anxiety, the mantra is peace and be still. And then for security, like if you don't feel like you're secure, so insecurity or safety protection, it's my spiritual connection protects me. So whatever that spiritual connection is for you, you are connected, you are at peace, and you are fully empowered to move beyond your limitations. So, all right, everybody, thank you so very much. I can't wait to hear what you guys felt about this webinar versus the last webinar. If you like this, we can continue doing this each and every month. And so be on the lookout tomorrow for this video replay, as well as the talking points. And then I would love to get your feedback on you know, to me, this is too much for an independent distributor just to decide like, hey, I want to go teach a master class on thyroid hormone. And so what is the best way for me to give you slides that are meaningful for you to teach a meeting? So ponder on that and shoot me a text over on Facebook Messenger. I am much more responsive on my business page than on any of my private pages. So yeah, guys, if everybody just wants to sit and take a moment, we can work on our stress level and just, you know, as simple as breathing in and breathing out. You know, everybody's got their new valor. So we all got empowerment in a bottle. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you guys next month. I'm still open for what you want to talk about. So let me know. Thank you so much for being subscribers, and we will talk soon. And lots of love. Love you guys. Bye-bye.